Welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is meeting today to study report of the joint auditors to the Board of Directors of the Public Sector Pension Investment Board, Special Examination Report 2021 of the 2021 reports of the Auditor General of Canada. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is meeting today to study Report 10, securing. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you are aware the website will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from health authorities as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it is highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. Must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizer at the room entrance. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. If the interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the Board of Internal Economy's guidelines for mask use and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. Today we have from the Office of the Auditor General, Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, and Melanie Cabana, Principal. With the folks from the Office of the Auditor General is Victoria Lutsev, partner at Deloitte, who was involved with the audit. From the Public Sector Pension Investment Board, we have the Chair of the Board, Martin Glynn, Neil Cunningham, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Jean-François Bureau, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial and Risk Officer. You will have 5 minutes to make your opening statement, and I'll go to Deputy Auditor General, Mr. Hayes. You have the floor.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the results of our special examination of the Public Sector Pension Investment Board. I want to start by acknowledging that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'm accompanied today by Melanie Cabana, who led this audit on behalf of our office, and by Victoria Lutsev, who is a partner with the accounting firm Deloitte. Our office and Deloitte are appointed joint auditors of this Crown Corporation. The Financial Administration Act requires that a special examination be carried out at least once every 10 years to assess whether a Crown Corporation's systems and practices provide reasonable assurance that its assets are safeguarded and controlled, its resources are managed economically and efficiently, and its operations are carried out effectively. We report a significant deficiency when, in our opinion, the corporation could be prevented from having such reasonable assurance. The Public Sector Pension Investment Board plays the significant role of investing and managing contributions from the pension plans of the Public Service, the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the Reserve Force. This special examination focused on selected corporate management practices and on the management of the corporation's investments and operations. I am pleased to report that the corporation had good systems and practices for managing its investments and operations. We found no significant deficiencies as a result of our audit work. However, we noted potential for improvement in areas not related to the management of investments, such as performance measurement and performance monitoring and reporting. For example, the corporation had set several strategic objectives, but did not have targets for measuring progress against these objectives in areas that included talent management and diversity and inclusion. As a result, the corporation did not consistently report to the board of directors on some of these performance indicators. Without this information, it is difficult for the board to monitor the corporation's performance and for management to track progress against strategic objectives and take corrective action as required. Nous avons aussi constaté que des améliorations.
We also noted that improvements were needed in risk mitigation and risk monitoring and reporting. For example, the corporation lacked risk appetite metrics, thresholds, or limits for some significant non-investment risks in certain areas, such as human resources planning. Without such thresholds and limits, management cannot make effective decisions to address these risks in line with the risk appetite statement approved by the board. Our office has committed to assessing and reporting on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals across all our audit work to support Canada's progress on this important international commitment. During this audit, we noted that the corporation integrated environmental, social, and governance considerations into its decision-making, and its investments indirectly addressed 3 of the United Nations goals. There is an opportunity for the corporation to enhance its reporting on the sustainability of its investment activities to more clearly link to the Sustainable Development Goals. The corporation agreed with our recommendations and prepared an action plan. As our audit work was completed in October 2020, I cannot comment on the corporation's progress in implementing its plan, but I expect the corporation's officials will be happy to update the committee. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. Would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. We will now go to Mr. Glynn. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much and good morning. I'm pleased to appear before the committee today to discuss the results of the special examination of PSP investments that was tabled at the end of 2021. I would like to start by acknowledging that since I'm in Vancouver, I am on the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. I am accompanied on this call today virtually by PSP CEO Neil Cunningham and its Chief Financial and Risk Officer Jean-François Bureau. The special examination was performed by PSP's joint auditors, the Office of the Auditor General of Canada and Deloitte. It considered whether PSP's systems and practices provided reasonable assurance that its assets are safeguarded and controlled, its resources are managed economically and efficiently, and its operations are carried out effectively. I am happy to report that this is the case and that no material deficiencies were found as part of this detailed and extensive audit exercise. PSP is a Crown corporation that operates at arm's length from the Government of Canada. It was established in 1999 to invest the amounts transferred by the Government of Canada for the funding of the post-2000 obligations of the pension plans of the Public Service of Canada, the Canadian Forces, the RCMP, and since March 1, 2007, the Reserve Force Pension Plan. As of March 31, 2021, PSP's net assets under management were $205 billion. PSP Investments statutory mandate is to manage the funds in the best interest of the contributors and beneficiaries and to maximize investment returns without undue risk of loss. Having regard to the funding, policies, and requirements of the plans and their ability to meet their financial obligations. PSP's investment approach is designed to achieve the best possible alignment with the obligations of the pension plans. The government communicates its risk tolerance for the pension plans to PSP annually, and our task is to design and implement the most suitable investment strategy, taking into consideration the level of risk tolerance of the government, while also maximizing returns and fulfilling the other requirements of our mandate. One way to evaluate the success of our investment approach is to compare PSP's return to the return of a reference portfolio. A reference portfolio is an example of the returns an investor could achieve with a passive investment approach that reflects the government's risk tolerance. PSP's investment strategy is focused on the long term, in line with the long-term nature of the pension obligations. So we believe that comparisons with the reference portfolio are most useful when considered over a long-term horizon, such as a 10-year horizon. Over the last 10 years, I'm proud to report that PSP has achieved a return of 8.9%, which compares favorably to the 8.2% return of the reference portfolio. This additional 0.7 of 1%, representing close to $11.3 billion, represents the value added by PSP investment strategic decision to build a more diversified portfolio. It's called the policy portfolio that includes less liquid assets and to engage selectively in active management activities. Let me now turn to the main focus of our appearance today, the results of the special examination. We were pleased that the auditors concluded that there were no significant or material deficiencies in the corporate management practices or management of investment operations of PSP. The findings validate the diligent work of the board, management, and hard-working and dedicated employees to implement and maintain a comprehensive and effective risk governance framework. The board oversees the business and affairs of the corporation, and PSP is accountable to Parliament through the tabling of its annual report. The special examination confirmed that PSP's board functions independently, provides strategic direction, has the capacity and competencies to fulfill its responsibilities, and that it effectively carries out its oversight role. I feel privileged to have the opportunity to serve on the board of PSP with truly exceptional individuals who take great pride in serving their country and working diligently to ensure PSP's success in delivering the pension promise. While all systems and practices were found by the established criteria, some areas of improvement were identified. PSP has already implemented measures to address 3 of those areas. We have set and approved risk appetite metrics and thresholds for significant non-investment risks. We have completed compliance risk assessments to evaluate adherence to relevant regulations, and we have established a solid and more frequent framework for reporting of regular and ad hoc risk areas to the board. A 4th recommendation to ensure that strategic objectives are supported by measurable performance indicators is nearly fully implemented, with full implementation expected to be completed by the end of March 2022. An action plan to implement the last recommendation to develop and apply an enterprise-wide risk management framework for model risk has been launched with significant progress having been already made. The model governance framework currently in place for risk group models is being reviewed and adapted to include the Chief Investment Officer group models. This recommendation is expected to be fully implemented by the end of next fiscal year. In conclusion, I would like to thank our auditors, the Office of the Auditor General, and Deloitte for performing such a thorough and diligent examination. The Board of Directors, management, and employees of PSP all share the same objective, that is to fulfill PSP's mandate to the very best of our abilities. While the recent pandemic has most certainly taken a physical and emotional toll, we're proud that we were able to stay focused on our investment mandate our responsibilities to the contributors and beneficiaries, and the health and well-being of our people. Before I close, I would like to acknowledge the announcement yesterday of our...
I'm sorry, Mr. Glynn. We will now have to move on to questioning. So we start our rounds of questioning, beginning with the official opposition for 6 minutes. Mr. Lawrence, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And I'll just yield the first little bit of my time, maybe a minute or so, so the witness can finish, if that's okay with him.
That's right. I'm 30 seconds away, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that yesterday there was an announcement of our CEO Neil Cunningham's planned retirement, the news of which was officially conveyed to the board last week. He has given us 13 months notice, so we can perform a proper external internal search, and he leaves PSP after 19 years of service in excellent shape and performing very well, and we wish him well in his retirement. And those conclude my remarks, and thank you very much for the extra time.
I'd like to start out by congratulating you, sir. Now, I guess 2 years in a public accounts, I don't know if I've seen an audit this clean. And so really, really great work. And I'm sure it's a great relief and appreciation to all those great public service workers out there that indeed you are doing your job, which is fantastic to hear. I just want to I see in the report on page 2, we see that the 5-year return was 5.8 and 8.5. I know your number's slightly different because you've got slightly different dates. I assume that yours are more update than this one. Could you just, you referenced similar risk portfolios. I think that might be a fair way to characterize it. But would you happen to know or be able to get for me how your return would compare to, say, the indexes like the TSX, the Dow, the NASDAQ, et cetera?
Neil or JF, do you want to answer that?
Well, I can certainly comment on it. When we compare, so given I'll use the March 31st, 2021 results to give you a better idea. We have our portfolio, we have the reference portfolio that is set by the government, but we also have a policy portfolio that we track, and it becomes our benchmark. And in there, you've got a series of benchmark like the S&P 500, the TSX, et cetera, for public markets. And for private markets, we have custom-made benchmark that we tracked. And to use the same 10-year approach that Mr. Glenn used in his presentation, the total fund generated over 10 years approximately 1.1% above the benchmark for a total of almost $13 billion. So clearly, based on our own internal benchmark, we're performing slightly better than against the reference portfolio set by the government.
Once again, well done, and congratulations on that. One of the few, I guess it'd be called minor deficiencies that the auditor did come up with were the lack of metrics respecting non-investment risk, and one was with respect to global branding. I didn't quite understand the importance of global branding for this pension fund, but perhaps you could explain that to me, and why you were deficient and what you're doing to fix it.
So the comment refers to our initial strategic plan. That was a 5-year plan that was set almost 7 years ago now. And one of our strategy at the time was to expand the global branding of PSP. And the idea was to benefit from better relationship with global partners and make sure that PSP had access to the best investment possible around the world. So we wanted to be better known, better recognized. And one thing that we did at the time to achieve that was to open an office in New York and also one in London. And about 2 years later, and I may be off on my timing here, but we also opened in Hong Kong a smaller office.
Thank you for that. One of the things that comes quite clearly across from both the Financial Management Act and also from the audit, that that your mandate is fairly specific, and that's to generate. I'm sure there's some nuances, but to generate the best possible rate of return at the minimum amount of risk going forward. I did see in this audit a little bit of it appeared mission creep, and as much as a comment as anything, I would encourage you to stay on mission, because there are, of course, tens of thousands of public service workers who are depending on you going forward. So I'd make that comment, and then I'd say we have been in a bull market for a long while. I think one of the longest bull markets in history. How are you preparing the pension fund to perhaps at the end of every bull there is a bear, to perhaps tolerate a bear market?
Yeah, I'll take this one, and thank you for the question. Our portfolio is designed for long-term performance, meaning that we have different aspects of the portfolio construction. JF described some of the asset classes that we're in, public and private. And the intention is to add as much diversification as we can, so that over the long term, the portfolio can handle the ups and downs that inevitably come from market activity. And so we have, right now, only 30% of our assets are actually in publicly traded equities. The other 20% is in fixed income, and roughly 50% is in various public markets investments that have different characteristics and different correlations, if I can use that word, to what happens in the public markets, all of which is designed to protect in the long term, remove volatility to the extent we can, provide cash flow on a constant basis. We did make an adjustment to the portfolio last year when we started worrying more about inflation than we have in the past. And that was to make some slight adjustments to add a portion of our infrastructure portfolio related specifically to high inflation correlated assets. And we also added some allocation to our private credit business, which typically is investing in floating rate debt, which will move with the market. But these are significant for us, but we're not making dramatic swings ever, because it's the long-term nature of the portfolio construction, which is the most important.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. We now move to Mr. Dong for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for joining us today. I always knew that PSP is quite large, but it's until I read the report, it's actually enormous. It's as of March 31st, 2020, it's $169.8 billion, and I count the zeros as 8 zeros following the 8, so it's quite sizable. And for the public who are watching, that's a pension contributed by public service, by armed forces, by RCMP and reserve force. So you can see the importance in the health of this pension. My question is to Deputy Auditor General Hayes. How does PSP performance compare to other large pension funds in Canada?
Thank you for the question. I think this might be one that management at PSP might be best able to answer. Our focus is really on looking at systems and practices and making sure that they provide the corporation with reasonable assurance that their assets are protected.
Sure.
So I'll leave the answer to Mr. Glynn. Yeah.
So actually,
yeah, Neil, why don't you take this?
Yeah, I'll start, and JF may want to add something at the end. It's one of the things which is really important to always remember about PSP is that our investments mirror the risk appetite which is given to us from TBS, and it's reflected in the reference portfolio that Jean-Francois referred to earlier. So our reference portfolio is comprised, and it's a theoretical mix of equities and fixed income on a passive basis. Would be 59% equities, 41% fixed income. Now that compares to, and the other organization that uses a similar approach is the Canada Pension Plan, who has an 85% equity and 15% fixed income asset mix. Okay. That is fully reflective of the risk appetite that our sponsor, Government of Canada Treasury Board, is willing to take. And so what it means is to do a direct comparison between our results and that of CPPIB or even one of the other pension funds who have different mandates, different liability profiles, different maturities, is an apples to oranges comparison. And it's the reason why we use measures such as the reference portfolio to say if we were totally passive, maintaining the risk appetite that's given to us, similar to what your own broker would do when they ask you about your own risk appetite. It's a very similar process. How do we do relative to that? So in other words, what's our return while maintaining our diligence on the risk appetite that we're given? Now we do some, notwithstanding that, we do some benchmarking, and JF, you may want to get into that a little bit, but I think just a little bit, just for time's sake.
Limited time, but I get the idea. Thank you very much. Now back to Deputy AG Hayes. In your opinion, how did the governance and board of a PSP perform? I know that there is no large deficiency. Can you just quickly give us an overview?
That's right. You've covered the overall conclusion. The corporation has reasonable assurance that the board is operating well. We did identify a few areas that management could improve on in order to increase the information that the board receives so that it can follow the progress that's being made towards strategic objectives and targets and all of that. But overall, we did not identify any significant deficiencies in the board and management.
And your audit encourages PSPIB to integrate to sustainable development goals. Can you please explain how you have seen this done elsewhere and what kind of impact it would be for PSPIB?
Sure. The Sustainable Development Goals, of course, are a major focus for our office, and we do see the integration of these goals, targets, and the strategies in a number of Crown corporations. It's becoming more prevalent. The importance of these for a given corporation will depend on the nature of their mandate, and given the investment mandate of PSPIB and the influence that it can have on the achievement of sustainable development goals, we suggested that this could be a lens through which it can look at some of their activities. In addition, it provides an opportunity for PSPIB to show how the work that it does contributes to the government's achievement of its commitment to the UN SDGs.
That's good. And then going back to the last special examination, 2011, has the PSP board implement all the recommendations offered by the AG's office?
So yes, we found that they did recommendations. There were two areas in the report where we identified that there were improvements made, but maybe a little bit more space for improvement. I might ask Melanie Cabana or Victoria Lutsev if they want to add to that.
I can take it on. So one of these areas was related to, in the past, PSP was more reporting on accomplishment of tasks and not as much as on progress on the objectives. So we did see an improvement there. But now I guess some fine tuning is necessary to actually specify measurable targets for the non-investment risks. But before it was more prevalent. And the other area where we've seen some improvement was.
Oh. Thank you. And we now move on to Ms. Sinclair Desgarnets, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses for coming here today. It's a pleasure to hear from PSP, based here in Montreal, among other things. To follow up on the comments of my colleagues, the mandate of PSP, well, obviously, it's the performance, which has been very high over the past few years. but this mandate is also combined with the stability mandate, the economic stability issue. PSP is a Crown corporation. It has a duty to be a leader and to apply best practices at all levels. The audit report underscores that this has been done with respect to governance. Congratulations. As far as financial risks, that has been good. But when it comes to environmental risk, there is progress that remains to be achieved. The report has just come out a month ago, underscoring that the Canadian economy has been jeopardized by investments in the oil sector. The report is called Valuation of Risk Pertaining to Climate Change. The report says that if we don't do more to withdraw our financial investments from the oil sector, the Canadian economy is compromised. So we have this report from the Bank of Canada, and PSP hasn't signed to the Owner Alliance, contrary to Desjardins, and that the assets invested in sustainable development are about 6%, and its peers has an investment of 9%. So my question is for PSP. I don't know who would like to answer, but how is it that when we look at the long-term objectives, I'm a little bit surprised to hear that the long-term investments mentioned by Mr. Glenn is done over a 30-year basis. How is it that PSP is not doing more to be a leader and have better better practices in the area of the environment? Thank you very much for your question, Ms. St. Clair Desjardins. I will answer that question.
It's an interesting question because what we've discovered over the last year, and we've spent a great deal of time on exactly this point over the last year, is that we at PSP were doing a great deal with respect to climate awareness, investing in positive climate change investments, but we weren't keeping score as well as we could be. And we've undertaken in the last short period of time to do exactly that. So I can describe our approach, which is at the first level, it's ensuring the safety of our assets from a physical climate change. That was something we've been doing for years. We have a responsible investment team who sits on every one of our investment committees for private investments. And so it's twofold with respect to engagement on the one hand, primarily with public companies, working with other similar investors to have them improve their practices, improve their transparency, improve their disclosure. And we've had some pretty significant improvements in that regard. On the physical assets, I wish I could do it today. We are on the verge of releasing our climate investment strategy. It's not public yet, but it'll be released in the next few weeks. And what you'll see is we have a commitment to multifaceted approaches to, we call it the pathways to net zero. We're committed to global net zero for in general, and we'll invest through, and you may have noticed just yesterday we issued our framework for our first green bond issue, which will hopefully happen this week. We have a commitment to grow our green assets. We have a commitment to grow our transition assets, all with the intention of removing carbon from the world. So.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. So that means you have figures, and you will be able to come up with these statistics very soon. And you have a commitment with respect to carbon neutrality.
A disinvestment program. And the reason for not having a disinvestment program, and it's actually very similar to what John Graham at CPPIB said yesterday, and that is that our commitment is to remove carbon. We can divest and make our own portfolio look greener, but it doesn't do anything to remove carbon from the environment. It's, whoever buys it continues on. And so our commitment is through either advocacy or actual cash dollar investment to assist companies to migrate to a cleaner activities. And so it's not just oil and gas, it's a number of other industries, many of which are important in Canada, where capital is required in order to allow them to shift from what they're doing and invest money to get greener. And that to us is a better way or a complementary way, I guess, to simply divesting.
Et vous avez raison que c'est nécessaire.
You're right, that's required.
And we will now move on to Mr. Desjardins for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to first begin by thanking the witnesses who are present with us today. Thanks so much for your service. And I was pleased to see by the Auditor General's report, very good audit. And so congratulations to all of those who participated in ensuring our public corporations are accountable and transparent and have good governance. So I also want to mention, I think it was one of the earlier witnesses, maybe, I actually don't recall, but Mr. Cunningham, I believe it's you who's retiring in 13 months. Congratulations. Thank you for your service there as well. But I do want to turn to one aspect of the report that the Auditor General did point to, and maybe this is best suited for Mr. Cunningham as well. But according to the Auditor General's report, there was the strategic direction related to the prioritization of diversity and inclusion. And part of that was, of course, implemented within the strategic direction of the corporation and had particular performance indicators. But there were no specific targets to measure whether that objective would be achieved. And so I'm wondering if you can speak on how those performance indicators were intended to guide the work of the corporation. But the second part of my question, which will be when will the new performance indicators be in place for this strategic objective?
Great, thanks for the question. And, I'll say the EI&D has been a hugely important aspect of what we do with the organization over the last several years. I co-chair our EI&D committee along with our head of HR. And so the focus on equity, inclusion, and diversity is immense. The intention is to have it ingrained in the fabric of the organization and not something that's just kind of done on the side. And I think we're making great strides in getting there. With respect to your question specifically, we used to report to the board on an annual basis on the gaps that we had compared to the market on the 4 areas where we specifically are required to invest, to report under the Employment Equity Act. So there, those 4 groups are women, Aboriginal peoples, persons with disabilities, and members with visible minorities. Since November of 2021, we've expanded that fairly significantly, and we now present a full EI&D report to our board of directors that contains our ambition level, benchmark, and progress. It also tracks several other metrics such as senior leadership diversity, succession diversity, promotion diversity, external hires diversity, et cetera. So, we took that comment very seriously, and we have a number of other measures which I didn't mention there.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Cunningham. And just to further elaborate on that, just to confirm, you're saying that just recently your work has included a renewed version in 2021 of some of these indicators. Is that correct?
Correct.
And part of those indicators you mentioned were probably, there was likely some kind of inheritance from the former structure related. You probably kept women, Aboriginal people or Indigenous people, other minority groups, visible minorities in particular, but was there any mention for particularly the equity piece related to the 2S LGBTQ community?
Most definitely LGBTQ, We have veterans. We distinguish by multi-generational and by educational background, as well as ethnicity. It's truly is multifaceted to capture as much as we can. Our EIND council, which is made up of roughly 100 employees, all on a volunteer basis, have split themselves into 8 diversity groups. And each have different activities that they do to promote understanding and information. You know, we did a lot of work with Black Lives Matters. Last year, we had a panel that was, entitled. I can't remember the name of it. It was several of our Black employees speaking on a panel, largely about education. Breaking down the unconscious biases, which we all acknowledge we have, in order to move forward in all of our inclusion and diversity targets.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. And just to relate to that last portion, when will this current framework be renewed for diversity and inclusion? And what does the review process look like? Will it be reporting to the board?
It reports to the board on a constant basis. It's a new structure, if you want. And we do talk about it in our responsible investing report. And I think you'll see a renewed focus in our annual report or our responsible investing report when we next publish.
Mr. Desjardins, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Chair, what's the time remaining?
Have 30 seconds left. 30
Perfect.
seconds.
So related to when the new performance indicators will be in place. So 2021 was when the most recent indicators are put in place, but when will the next cycle be, and when can the board expect a review of the existing successes or maybe not successes of the existing framework?
Well, we report at least annually, but we talk about EIND on a quarterly basis when the board meets.
So there won't be a need, you're saying, for new performance indicators on diversity and inclusion for now?
Well, achievement of target will occur over time. So, until we achieve the targets we have, we're not updating. We look at them every year, of course, to make sure they're still relevant and how we're doing against them.
Thank you. We are now ready to move to the second round of questioning for 5 minutes. Mr. Cooper, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will direct my questions to the PSP witnesses, whoever wishes to answer. On page 2 of the report, it notes that there are PSP assets in which there are investments across 85 countries. Now, there have been significant concerns raised about Canadian pension fund investment in Chinese state companies and Chinese state banks that have been complicit and have helped facilitate egregious human rights abuses, including the ongoing genocide against Uyghur Muslims and other very serious human rights abuses. So I would just ask whoever wishes to answer if you could speak to PSP's investments in Chinese state enterprises and Chinese state-controlled banks.
Well, I can confirm that we don't have any investments in state-owned enterprises in China. May refer to JF with respect to the Chinese banks. I don't believe we have any investments there. But one of the challenges which we face as global investors is very often we invest in indexes because we can't get the diversified risk that we're looking for from direct investing. And so it often happens that there will be companies in indexes which I'll call it, it's not inadvertently, but we automatically pick up that exposure on a completely passive basis when investing in that index in order to capture that risk return. It's not our practice to exclude, other than anything which is specifically excluded or on sanctions lists or other such exclusions which would be automatic. JF, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, absolutely correct, Neil. And if anything, that wouldn't be material for PSP if ever included in the index.
Okay, so you could then confirm, at least in terms of any direct investments, as far as the U.S. PLA list, which has, I think, at last count, 59 entities, that there is no direct investment from PSP in any of those sanctioned enterprises.
That would be correct.
Now, as far as you talked about indexes, certainly MSCI indexes are state-owned or state-directed enterprises, or many Chinese companies are included in these MSCI indexes. So what essentially is your board doing to guard against in funding or in any way supporting the very serious human rights concerns in China today?
I think it's a technical question on whether something on the sanctions list could be included in the MSCI index. And my understanding is that they would not be, but I'm not 100% certain on what the process there is to keep them out of the index.
Is anyone else able to address the MSCI index?
If there was a sanction or a restriction by the issued by the Canadian government, it would be respected and excluded from the index.
Okay. Well, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. And we move on to Ms. Shanahan for 5 minutes, please.
Chair, and I thank all the witnesses for being here this morning, and particularly Mr. Cunningham. I don't know if this is the first time that you appear before a parliamentary committee, but I guess one's career in public service would not be complete without doing so. So thank you very much for being here. And I do want to follow up on an earlier line of questioning regarding risk in the portfolio, and I can appreciate greatly that, you know, the check marks are there and the risk mitigation is in place, needs some fine-tuning, but it's the risks that we don't take into account, right, that are the most problematic. And just full disclosure, I was in client-facing investment counseling work in the 2000s, so you'll recall ABCP, asset-backed commercial paper. I was actually at the McGill Pension office at the time, and that was a big shock to all of us because, of course, we all considered it AAA, and it was not. So what I'm getting to are things like stranded assets. Mr. Carney talks about that in his book, and I know, and I think my colleague from the bloc referenced it as well. So it's assets that, because of climate change, have become either unusable or uninsurable or whatever. So that represents a significant risk to the portfolio. Can you talk to us about how you're identifying this risk in your portfolio?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I can tell you, JF can give you chapter and verse on the ABCP because he was very much involved in that. But to your question specifically on how we protect against stranded assets, it's I'd say it's a financial filter that one puts on an investment when they're making it, when you're doing your analysis of the potential investment. And by the financial filter, I mean, you'd look at an asset and you would say, not just what kind of cash flow do we expect to get from this asset over our holding period, but what's our exit going to look like, and what, you know, who will be the buyers, and what do we think the exit price might be? And that's when you really get into the stranded asset issue, where you look at, let's take an extreme example, a coal mine. If you were looking to invest in a coal mine, you might get a great return over a period of time, but at the end of our holding period, it may have a zero value, it may even have a negative value if you have to remediate the hole in the ground. And so we take that into account in doing the full assessment of the asset. And what we find is we just become non-buyers or non-investors of things where we can identify a potential for it to become a stranded asset, either for us or for the next buyer who we think wouldn't pay value for it.
Well, thank you very much for that, because the costs, of course, of cleaning up environmental damage are astronomical, and I think all of us know of a case particular in our own regions. So moving on from there, PIB has been calculating its portfolio's carbon emissions since 2017. Have you reduced your weighted carbon intensity?
We have.
Yes, okay.
And it may take me a minute to find the specific reference in my notes, but since we started measuring it 2016 or 17 to 2021, the reduction in emissions is in the magnitude of 20%, but we'll get the exact number for you. I think JF's looking at the notes right now. It's also continuing to reduce over time.
All right, very much appreciated. And I'd just like to get your views, Mr. Cunningham, especially as you will be leaving us. What are your views on the government's policy which requires climate-related financial disclosures and the development of net zero plans for federally regulated institutions, including financial institutions, pension funds, and government agencies? Could you give us your views on that policy?
So we are very strongly in favor of all policies towards disclosure of exposures. And we made a joint statement with the other, we call ourselves the Maple 8, the big Canadian pension plans, roughly a year ago, strongly encouraging all issuers to be aligned with TCFD standards and disclosure standards. I really don't think I should be commenting on public policy with respect to government crown corporations and whether that's an appropriate policy or not. I don't think it's up to me or PSP to opine on that.
Thank you. And we move to Ms. Sinclair Degany for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to follow up with another question. Mr. Cunningham, you said that one of the ways to contribute to the transition towards climate change mitigation is to help companies. My question is very simple, and I'd like to have a quick answer, please, given the limited time I have. Do you intend to ask for accountability from the companies that you are funding, including public officials? Are you asking these companies how they're using this money that's being loaned or invested to show how it's being used to achieve this transition?
I'm not sure I fully understood your question. But I will say that as far as investing in companies to, transition to a greener economy, it's pretty early days for us. And we're taking the lead from others, including Mr. Carney and the work he's doing at Brookfield and others, in terms of learning what is the best way for us to do this. So I hope that answered your question. I don't have metrics.
I had a question about accountability. So when you invest in a company, how can you be reassured that the money is used and that they do, in fact, achieve a reduction of the carbon footprint? For example, greenhouse gases. Is this considered in the analysis? And then once these these investments are made? Are they really being used well in this transition?
My apologies for not understanding earlier. I will say there will be measures when we invest in a transitional asset. When I said it's early days, because we haven't done it yet, but that use of proceeds that you're talking about is extremely important. In fact, when we invest in a climate change envelope, the use of proceeds will probably be the most important aspect of whether we make the investment or not in those transitions.
Parfait. Merci.
Thank you. So to follow up on my Madam Shanahan's colleague.
Is up, and we move on to Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to address this next question to Mr. Haynes, the Deputy Auditor General. The report that was outlined, it talks about there was a lack of targets for inclusion, equity, and diversity within PSP. But we just heard from Mr. Cunningham that there were, in fact, some performance indicators or targets. Can you just describe for me what the report that was published by the Auditor General states is the issue exactly related to how we measure or hold accountable that framework?
Thank you. So in simple terms, they have a strategic plan, a strategic objective or objectives to achieve. And the issue that we brought forward is that the targets should be more precise, should be more specific or measurable. I think what you might have heard from Mr. Cunningham, and he may be able to elaborate here, is that since the work that we have reported on, some action has been taken. We can't speak to the action that has been taken. That might be something that we would look at when we go in next for either our financial audit work that's coming up or our planning later in the fall. But Mr. Cunningham may be able to add some color there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham. Could you respond directly to whether or not what the Auditor General's report is stating related to the lack of clarity on targets has been achieved by the new plan and what those targets are?
Sure. Well, so not to sound flippant, but we take the OAG's recommendations very seriously. And when this came up in the audit, we said we need to have some more specific targets. And we do, and that's what we reported in November. And every November, we'll update the targets and report to our board of directors on progress.
And so, to be clear, they are currently in place as of that date.
They are.
And the next review period for the board will be in April?
Officially in November. So it'll be an annual process.
Excellent. And just to follow up on that, so the indicators themselves, the process is the board reviews the work of the internal group, which is comprised of folks internal to the corporation, including yourself, who are co-chair of the existing system.
A short answer, please.
Yeah, not quite. We actually have two separate. We have the EI&D Council of 100 employees, which is really educational for the whole organization. And then we have our our human resources team who tracks the achievement of the various diversity targets and initiatives. And it's the latter who reports to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To Ms. Bradford for 5 minutes, please.
I would like to thank, first of all, our witnesses for coming before us today and congratulate you on a lovely, clean audit and great returns with low risk. So as a former financial planner, I find this very reassuring. So I always also like to congratulate Mr. Cunningham on your pending well-reserved retirement. After 19 years, that's practically a life sentence, and I think we can all be grateful that you did not escape early for good performance. So I wish you all the best in your retirement. So now, looking at, this is directed to the PIB. It operates at arm's length from the federal government. It's not part of the federal public administration. It makes its own investment decisions. How does that ownership structure help you achieve your mandate? I'm not sure which one of the witnesses would like to address that.
I'll take that. It's Martin Glenn here. I'm the chair. Yes, we have a very arm's length relationship with the government, but a very good one. And we have a number of mechanisms to make sure that we're on track, respecting and understanding their risk appetite. We liaise with the chief actuary and many other parties. But from a point of view of independence, we have our own board of directors. There's an independent nominating committee that nominates new ones. And there's with a search firm that assists. And the result of that is that we have excellent candidates who are all competent and financially, I would say, expert. And so it allows for a very high level of governance at the board. And so that's essentially how we operate. And I think it's the high watermark of how boards in the public sector can relate. So we're very pleased with our structure and the cooperative and supportive nature of our relationship with TBS and the other ministries.
Well, thank you for that. So now the fund's long-term target rate of return is at least 4%, and you've comfortably exceeded that. So what happens to the delta? In other words, what impact does exceeding that target have on members and the government? Would possibly in the future the contribution rates be lowered temporarily, or what are your thoughts on that?
Do you want me to take that, Martin?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, it's actually written into the act or the rules that the concept of a non-permitted surplus, which is now at 125% of the long-term funding requirement for the firm. If we were to exceed that 125% funding, then there's mechanisms that kick in. Which time doesn't really allow to go through all of them, but basically there's the possibility of a contribution holiday. Or other action that the minister, frankly, has the final word on what action would be taken.
Okay, thank you. So now the next couple of questions I will address to the Auditor General. So according to your report, PSP Investments had a procedure for validating the models used to value its financial instruments and measure the associated risk. But this procedure did not include a model risk assessment methodology or other model risk management procedures. Can you explain in greater detail the nature of the problem identified and the measures that should be taken? Mr. Hayes?
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to start with a bit of some high-level answers to that, and then I might turn to Madame Cabana to expand, or Ms. Lutzev. So what we found, and we reported this in paragraph 30 and 31, we found that there was work to be done to set the procedures for risk assessment and to identify how the procedures for model development, ownership, and maintenance, independent validation, monitoring, and reporting would be done. It's not to say that they don't have, a model data validated validation procedure. It's just that there were improvements that could be made in these areas, and we felt that with improvements in these areas, there could be consistency across the corporation's business units and investment units. Ms. Cabana, would you like to add to that?
I can maybe give some example to try to put it more concretely for you, but one of the areas where we think it should be strengthened was, for example, when we say model risk assessment methodology, is to help classify the different models because they're not equally critical. Also define and clarify ownership. So who has the ownership of the models? So it was really not that the procedure was there, is that it was needing some enhancement because model is very important for PSP. So
thank you. We now move on to Mr. Bragdon for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to each of the presenters today for the great work they've done and a good report coming out as it relates to the pension and the funds, and how we wish all statements and reports had these kind of returns. and growth projections. And just want to commend you on that. And again, Mr. Glenn, I believe it was you that is moving towards retirement. All that usually means is a new chapter begins, and probably even get busier. It just seems that way with a lot of people who move into that next chapter. But congratulations on a successful career. Couple of questions I'd like to just start off with. First one I'll address. Obviously, I believe it may start with you, Mr. Hayes, or you can direct it where you may wish. But with respect to corporate risk management, you found that PSP Investments had not fully implemented a risk-based compliance program. Can you explain what a risk-based compliance program is, and then follow up to that, what facets of the compliance program had not been implemented by PSP Investments?
So I'll start with describing a risk-based compliance program, and then maybe Ms. Cabana can add to this. So what we would expect is that the corporation would have taken an inventory of the various legal instruments, whether it's laws, policies, regulations, directives, et cetera, that apply to them. Ultimately, then there would be an assessment of whether or not those the responsibilities are well understood for who owns that. Risk mitigation assessments, the implementation policies and practices, and ultimately reporting to the board on the carrying out of this function. Ms. Cabana might be able to give you some specifics as to what we have seen, but ultimately, having this information gives the board an understanding of how the corporation is addressing compliance risks.
I can just maybe add one thing, is that what we've noticed during our audit is that the assessment had started through the different asset class, so the different business line, if I can say, but was not completed. So that was the purpose of our recommendation, was to make sure that this gets completed.
Okay, good. Thank you. And according to your report, PSP Investments had a procedure for validating the models used to value its financial instruments and measure the associated risk. But this procedure did not include a model risk assessment methodology or other model risk management procedures. Can you explain in greater detail the nature of the problem identified and the measures that should be taken to correct it?
I will again leave that question to Ms. Cabana or Ms. Lutsev if they want to add to that.
Victoria, do you want to go?
Yes, thank you. So during the time of the examination, we confirmed that the procedure was in place, and the procedure specifically addressed the requirements for model validations. However, we found that the procedure did not include risk assessment methodology that would enable classification and assessment of criticality and materiality of the models. And we determined that that was an important documentation observation, and we included that in the observation.
Thank you. And just one more in this segment. How important is model risk validation for valuing financial instruments and measuring the associated risk?
It's fairly important. It's a good governance process, and what we've confirmed through special examination assessment is that model validation process is in place. It's conducted by risk management group, and all models that are critical and material are subject to model validation, which is independent verification.
Thank you. One quick question here in regards to, and this would be to the public sector aspect, pension investment, perhaps to you, Mr. Glenn, in regards to, you mentioned a reference portfolio as a measure of how well your portfolio is performing. Is this reference portfolio constructed by your organization or by a third party?
I think I'll allow Neil to answer that.
Okay.
Sure. It's given to us by Treasury Board.
Okay, and how do you construct or select this reference portfolio? Or is that totally done through them?
Well, it's totally done by them, and it is meant to reflect their view of the risk that they are willing for us to take, I guess is the best way of describing it. So it comes in the form of several, 3 or 4 categories of public equities and categories of fixed income, which are domestic and global with specific percentages attached to it.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we move on to Mr. Cooper for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will direct my questions to the PSP witnesses. I want to ask about investments in the Canadian energy sector. I know there is a great emphasis that has been placed upon ESG, but we know that here in Canada we have the safest, cleanest, and most ethical oil and gas in the world. And there are significant opportunities that have been identified in the energy sector. We know that oil is in a multi-year bull market, and in terms of maximizing profits, in terms of what is likely to be at least a 4 to 6 year bull cycle, there is a significant opportunity in terms of Canadian oil and gas. Among those who have recognized this is Eric Nuttall, who is the senior portfolio manager with 9 Point Partners, who said that among the best opportunities in the world are here in Canada. And in particular, he's most excited about smaller oil and gas companies given their depressed valuations. So to the PSP witnesses, can you speak to that?
So thank you, Mr. Cooper, for the question, which sounds like an investment recommendation that we should be looking into. But the the reality is, so we don't have a specific oil and gas asset group to invest in the sector specifically. And that's more because of the historical volatility and size of the investments and the skill you require in order to, invest in some of those junior oil and gas companies that you're referring to. By the same token, we also, as I said earlier, do not have exclusions for oil and gas or other industries, because we think there are circumstances when an investment does make sense. And I described earlier the financial filter that one would put on any investment where the cash flows that one expects to return to get from them and the residual value at the end of your investment period would factor into it. So to the extent there are opportunities in the Canadian oil patch, whether it's in public entities or private ones, we are potential and actual participants without a bias one way or the other, but taking those long-term factors into account, including the improvement that companies have and will make in terms of environmental footprint from their activities.
Well, thank you for that, and I guess let me just say that obviously the mandate, the overriding mandate of the board is to get the best rate of return, and I hope that, and I take it from your answer, that the significant opportunities that exist are not going to be forgone as a result of, for example, ESG.
Well, ESG is taken into account in everything that we do. And so it's not just the E, not just the S, not just the G, it's all of them. And that's a significant part of all our investing decision making. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes.
Yes, the short answer to my question is yes, but yes to what?
Well, yes, maybe it's no, that no, we won't exclude an investment because of a factor which appears to be it's the mitigation, I guess, is the question. So yes, everything is on the table in terms of a potential investment if it meets the investment screens that I've described.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we move now to Mr. Fragiskatos for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of you, and congratulations again. I'm new to the committee, so perhaps it's my good fortune to come across a group and sit in on a meeting where the audit is so complimentary. I remember, oh, he's gone, but Mr. Lawrence, when he spoke about his experiences at committee, it's not always certain what you're going to find, and this is good. This is very refreshing. So I wanted just to, and I note in the report, and this first question will go to Mr. Hayes. I know that in the report, it's pointed out that there's 147 subsidiaries of the board, 6 that are wholly owned. The report notes that the audit of the subsidiaries did not take place. It would be hard to do the 147. But what about the 6 wholly owned subsidiaries and doing audits there? Was there anything preventing you legally from carrying that out, or was it a question of resources? What held that audit from going forward?
Thank you for the question. I might ask Ms. Cabana to expand on this. We are appointed as of right in the Financial Administration Act as the auditor or joint auditor of all Crown corporations, including the parent Crown corporations and wholly owned subsidiaries. We do have the opportunity to waive the appointment for those corporations, and we typically do not waive, but in some cases there are some subsidiaries that we do not audit. I believe that there are some in this portfolio that we do not audit. So Ms. Cabana, can you add to that?
Yes, there are some subsidiaries that we do not audit, that we waived our rights on PSP. I get what I could say about the wholly owned subsidiaries, that while we didn't audit the subsidiaries itself, we did include a portion in this special examination where we looked at the governance practices of PSP related to the wholly owned subsidiaries.
Okay, and I understand that, but can I just get a little more? And it's just out of curiosity. There's nothing really to the question beyond that. Just to understand more of the technicalities behind audit decisions of your office. Again, I'm new to the committee, so that explains it. But what was the decision behind not going ahead and auditing the 6 wholly owned subsidiaries of the board? What was the rationale there? And that goes to Ms. Cabana.
It was mostly, a decision in scope. The special examination was large enough as it was that we decided to go the route with the governance practices instead of going into the wholly owned subsidiaries.
Okay. I did see that there was an audit done of, and as you point out here in the answer, the report also underlines this, that there was an audit done of the systems and practices used by the board to audit the wholly owned subsidiaries themselves. This goes to Mr. Cunningham. First of all, sir, and I suppose I could have begun with this question, but in any case, what are the 6 wholly owned subsidiaries of the board, just for the record, and my understanding as well?
Can you name them all, JF? I'm sorry.
Neil, I was trying to go from memory. We do have wholly owned subsidiaries. We've got PSP Capital for one, which is a wholly owned, which is the subsidiary that is used to issue our debt, be it commercial paper or bonds. And there's other various subsidiaries that are held for jurisdiction and legal purposes. But in terms of investment, Neil, short of certain assets, I'm going from memory, but to be honest with you, I can't recall the names and the roles of each one. Melanie, would you have them in your notes?
It's fine. Perhaps up with the board could follow up with a list of those 6. Perhaps it's a bit unfair. There's 147, but I figured since there's 6 that are wholly owned by the board, that I thought maybe that list would be readily available. But it's not a judgment or anything. Someone from your side can follow up. And I ask because I'm just curious to understand what systems and practices the board uses to exercise oversight of either these subsidiaries or even subsidiaries in general terms. What are some key, is it just general standard best practices that are used, or is there specific things that you use as an organization to ensure best practices? And I ask that also because there's lessons here, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Fragicans.
Oh, we're done. Okay.
Yes, we're done.
Right.
And we now move on to Ms. Sinclair Degany for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some figures to answer the question with respect to the carbon footprint over the past 6 years that were measured. 99%. It went to 101 a couple years later. We're talking about carbon footprints here and carbon intensity. Indeed, it has decreased since 2016, but there is a significant increase between 2020 and 2021. So my question is as follows. Is this are you really trying to push to reduce this carbon footprint? That's my question.
So there's the short answer is yes, we are working to reduce. And when we release our climate investment strategy in the next little while, you'll see very specific targets towards investing in green assets, etc. Sometimes the measure of carbon footprint can be a little bit tricky in that our numbers can move with our AUM moving up and down as it tends to do over time. And so the short-term movement, in my view, of anything in our portfolio, carbon footprint included, is less meaningful than what you see over a longer period of time. And so I would stress that, that longer period is being indicative of what efforts are being made.
Parfait. Merci, Monsieur Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. I would simply like to ask you, on behalf of our taxpayers, sometimes the advice from our conservative friends are sometimes out of step. But in terms of carbon neutrality, we need to have a good impact, and we need to disclose the risks. As a Task Force for Financial Disclosure, they talked about best practices on the international scene. We would really like.
I'm not sure I heard the question in there. I definitely heard the commentary. We are committed to TCFD best practices. As I said earlier, the risks are apparent. It's a very nebulous area, though, in that the taxonomies are in flux and being negotiated or discussed as we speak for what's green, what's not green. There will be, and I think probably the most important aspect of this is it's not something that moving to net zero is not something that pension funds themselves can just move everything in that direction, and it takes the entire market and all the participants to be moving in that direction. And we're very much aligned with that direction itself.
Thank you. We move to Mr. Desjardins for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. According to the OAG's report, PSP Investments had not systematically integrated the objectives of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in its investment activities. But there's a quote from the OAG, there is an opportunity for the corporation to enhance its reporting on the sustainability impacts of its activities, end quote. Do you plan to have or give greater consideration to the goals of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development? And if so, could you elaborate on how PSP is tracking and monitoring its progress to ensure that PSP's investment activities contribute to each of the 18 goals?
So thank you for the question. And we certainly appreciate the importance of the UN SDGs, but we've not implemented them specifically into our investment strategies. Incorporating those SDGs into an investment strategy actually poses several challenges, including measurement of the alignment of investments and the mandate of the UN SDGs and their specific considerations. To meet these challenges, we should not just look at how ESG risks and opportunities affect the risk return profile of the investments, but also how a responsible investment portfolio affects the broader objectives of society or the SDGs. Our long-standing responsible investing approach overlaps with many of the UN SDGs, for example, climate change, climate action, responsible consumption and production, and gender equality. And our disclosure is focused on how we incorporate ESG considerations in our investment activities to meet our mandate and drive long-term value for contributors and beneficiaries.
Thank you for that. This one's now to the Deputy Hayes. Do you think it would be beneficial to have a more systematic approach to tracking how PSP investment activities actually contribute to each of the SDGs? And if so, what kind of oversight and performance measures could this actually achieve on behalf of Canadians?
As an office, we've taken the position that we will look at the SDGs and how they're implemented across the board, whether it's the government or in Crown corporations. And we are actively encouraging all of the entities that we audit to consider the SDGs in a manner that will contribute to the commitments made by the government. How these can be incorporated into the investment decisions, that's a question for management. I do believe, though, that in order to advance progress on many of the SDGs, there needs to be a whole of society approach to committing to action.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. We now go to Mr. Cooper for 5 minutes, please.
I don't have any further questions, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I don't know if Mr. Bragdon has.
Okay, Mr. Bragdon? Is Mr. Bragdon? There we go. Mr. Bragdon for 5 minutes.
Sure, my headset was hooked in properly. Is it okay? You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And we'll pick up with, according to the Office of the Auditor General for the strategic objective related to branding itself as a global pension investment manager, the corporation had performance indicators, but no specific targets to measure whether the objective would be achieved. Why are there not performance indicators in the first place? I guess would be the first question.
Neil, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Well, yeah, I want to make sure I understood your question, Mr. Bragdon. I mean, the lack of performance indicators was well. Let me say this. I'll approach it a different way. I would say the organization as a whole has sharpened our game in terms of KPIs in general, and the report of the OAG, as I said earlier, highlighted that to us that in certain areas we needed to sharpen our game, and we have. We took the recommendations very seriously.
Yeah, so basically it was like the specific targets I think they were looking for to measure whether the objective would be achieved. So I guess sharpening that is kind of where you're going in. So you're putting in mechanisms to sharpen that, I take it, is where it's going. Okay.
That's correct.
When will the new performance indicators be in place for the corporation's strategic objective of branding itself as a global pension investment manager?
It's an interesting question because that was a comment specifically directed to an objective of our previous strategic plan. And we now last year approved a new strategic plan where that specific branding objective is not one of our specific targets. But I will say that and our plan has 3 pillars and 10 shifts, we call it, for things we want to accomplish in order to be that organization that can manage not just the over $200 billion we have entrusted to us today, but as we grow to 300 and more over time. And so we do have measures in place and are adopting more as we get further into the plan for all the aspects of that strategic plan. So the specific comment related to one of those strategies in the previous plan, it specifically is not relevant to us going forward, but the concept of having measurable objectives in every aspect of our strategic plan, we have incorporated into it.
Okay. I have no further questions, Madam Chair. I'm good.
Thank you. Then we will move to Ms. Shanahan for 5 minutes.
A little extra time, or I'll be happy to share it with my colleague from the block. Wonderful, Chair. Thank you. And again, thank you to everyone who's here today. I'm going to go on a little bit of a philosophical bent. Bear with me, but it does have to do with Mr. Carney's book, Values, where he raises some very interesting questions around what we consider valuable as a society and how we measure value and where we find value. So, Mr. Cunningham, I would love to have your views on that direction of thought, because I think that it is we're having a moment, aren't we? Well, more than a moment, given the lessons that we are learning from the pandemic as to what is valuable to society, and then what the crises that is facing us in terms of climate change. Mr. Cunningham?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks for that question. And if you got through Mark's book, I congratulate you, because it is truly a tome in very small print, and there's a lot in it. And it strays from the strict mandate. When you get into values, it strays from the strict mandate of we as a pension fund are intended to do. And it was mentioned earlier that we have a very specific mandate with respect to long-term returns. And we practice best practices as part of it, because we believe that is an essential part of long-term returns. But there's a lot of public policy and public behavior which goes into the values, which I would say is beyond the scope of what one can expect a pension fund to do.
Perhaps another member of your team about the idea of building long-term value, how we need to open up the scope of what that means. And we addressed it just earlier regarding stranded assets, regarding unknown risks, and indeed, and I'll just share with you, I used to do the retirement workshop for the folks at McGill, getting ready for retirement. Of course, the big concern was, how much money would they have in their pension fund? If you know it's a hybrid pension fund, oh my gosh, it is just crazy how we had to do the calculations around defined benefit and the defined pension part. But all that to say that in the retirement workshop, we basically would come to the conclusion, if you were to lose everything today, what would you have? And it would be the place that you lived, and the fact that you could grow a garden, and the fact that you could continue living. Like I'm really talking. I'm taking you to an existential place, Mr. Cunningham, and so I really would like to hear your views, because you are doing a terrific job in the nuts and bolts of looking after that pension, and it's a credit to what you're doing. But is it not time to think out of the box?
Well, once again, you're bordering on our mandate, and I'd say in the analogy you gave, someone would have their home and their garden and their pension, which is our objective in what we do. But we've spent time on our mandate specifically to say how much does that line for the long-term benefit of our beneficiaries, or wording to that effect. What does that actually mean? And there is no explicit social purpose in the mandate for how we manage the money. My personal view is, not like, I don't think I can express it here when I'm representing PSP.
Excellent. Could you talk to us about the leadership role that PSP would play then internationally? Because I think you are a major player, certainly in Canada and North America. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that leadership role.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one, and that is completely appropriate. And I made reference to it earlier that a little over a year ago, the Maple 8 pension funds made a joint statement, the first time ever. Proud to say we were the leaders to get it going, where we encouraged all public markets issuers and participants to follow TCFD and SASB, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, requirements for reporting on their largely environmental but also social footprint. The objective being that there's a bit of a, I'll call it a bully pulpit, if you want, that once people are forced to disclose, then they will want to improve their scores. And so we'll have greater adoption of the principles, and then greater movement towards bettering one's score in
Thank you there, Mr. Cunningham.
Measured.
I'll thank you there, because I do want to share some time with Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Your time is actually up, but we will give some time to Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés. Go ahead for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank my colleague who wanted to share her time with me. My question is very simple and direct. Could you make a commitment, as some of your peers have done, such as the Quebec Investment Board and the Canada Pension Plan, to have carbon neutrality goals? I know that this cannot be done overnight, but at least between now and by 2050, do you make any commitment on that line?
Well, not to, merci pour la question, not to steal thunder from an announcement that we will be making in the near term. We will be announcing that we have that we are completely aligned with global net zero by 2050 in terms of the approach we're taking to investing in climate change. And we will have some very specific targets, shorter term targets, which are achievable with respect to green assets, green bonds, transition assets, and others. So you will see specific targets in the near future.
Est-ce que je peux demander?
Can I ask you, without, as you said, having too much information in advance, but when will you be making this announcement?
The timing is not yet determined. It'll be sooner rather than later. I know that's not what you're hoping to hear in terms of specifics, but it'll be sooner rather than later. And I also want to be careful that I don't get into disclosure issues, because as I said earlier, we just launched this week a green bond issuance, which has implications, I guess, around this area. And I don't, especially with my CFO on the line, I certainly don't want to say something that he's going to say you shouldn't have disclosed that when we're in a quiet period on selling the bonds.
Merci.
Thank you. One final question. Have you done an analysis on climate risk Yes, you did talk about physical risks, but what about regulatory risks, systemic risk, all the kinds of risks that can occur? And have you done this on a short, medium, and long-term basis?
GF, est-ce que je peux te demander?
Jean-François, can you answer that question? The question with respect to risk? Yes, of course. I thank you very much for your question, Ms. St. Clair de Gagny. In each of the analytical work done, we have to understand also that public investments are very liquid, but when it comes to public risks, we look at the risk level for every investment we make. And in this revision, that includes all SEG risks. Our department, along with the Vice President of Investments for responsible investment, will be sharing its findings with us, and that will be inventorying the list of risks. So every investment made, if there is an SEG risk, it is considered during the process. Thank you. So you could make some commitments with respect to the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. You agree to follow the standards described in this? I would refer to the answer provided by Mr. Cunningham earlier. There are certain commitments that we can say, yes, we will make a commitment. Neil can give you a date, but I can tell you it'll be before he retires. Thank you very much to the witnesses. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the witnesses for coming, and I wish Mr. Cunningham all the best in your upcoming retirement. Thank you.
Thank you for...
Go ahead.
No, thank you for having us, and we're very proud to represent PSP and be able to talk about PSP with you now at this session. So thank you.
Thank you very much. On Thursday, due to unforeseen circumstances, the study of health resources for Indigenous communities will be rescheduled. We will be attending to committee business and reviewing recommendations for report number 5, Lessons Learned from Canada's Record on Climate Change. Seeing no other business, is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? That was fun.